Clog number W43 is Joe Barrett. Joe is one of the pioneers of the women's game and was a member of the first Australian side to win the World Cup in 2013. Joe Barrett was born in Warwick and played her first game of rugby league for the Toowoomba Phillies. Joe then debuted for Queensland in 2004 and suffered a torn ACL. She had to give her first Queensland jersey to her replacement so she could wear it in the next game in Newcastle. In 2007, Joe made her Australian debut on the tour of New Zealand. Well, Joe Barrett, thanks for your time. Sitting here reflecting on a wonderful career, what are your thoughts now of where the game of women's rugby league has come from to where it is at this current stage? What does that mean to you?
Well, what it means a lot, and it's something I find hard to articulate given my history of being able to talk. It's quite phenomenal to sit now, and I have such good insight into where the women's game is. And to reflect, it doesn't feel like that long ago I was playing, and the ground the women's game has made up in just over a decade is phenomenal. And you talk about, I remember loose conversations with former players about, imagine if there was a female Broncos, imagine if our origin was like the men's. But I actually don't think we did. I don't think we thought it would be where it is. And the only thing that's even probably more exceptional for me than where it is where I think it's going. It's amazing.
And I think 10 years, maybe even 5 years, in 5 years, the dramatic change in the women's game. And it will only get better, discussing with others too. The development will come from, the foundations and the pathways, etc. So let's go back to where you started as a young girl in Warwick. Did you ever envisage being able to play rugby league?
Not at all. So I grew up, in a very sporting family, close-knit community. Rugby league's, sort of like the centre point of a lot of relationships and engagements in that local community in Warwick. And, I had opportunities to do little athletics and netball. My parents are always supportive of us doing any sport. I'm the youngest of three. My sister and I, off to netball, little A's. But my memories, really strong childhood memories, are of all things rugby league, being at the local junior rugby league, being at the senior rugby league, my brother playing, and being around the edges, like going and waiting in the car while he was training, kicking a ball on the sideline, kicking a ball with the boys at school. In my extended family, rugby league's the talking point, and it's on the radio and it's on the TV. So it's a strange thing for me because I played a lot of sport. I was a very physical young girl, but you just didn't sign up for footy. You just didn't play it. No one was playing it. No girls played it. I remember asking teachers, could we get a girls team? I remember saying to the boys I went to school with, hey, like we'd talk about if I signed up what club I would play for, but it never got beyond that because on my reflection, one of the biggest barriers I think for my parents as much as me was the social barrier. It wasn't socially acceptable for little girls to play. And as I turned 13, a little girl was playing on the, my family was associated with Collegians Junior Rugby League, and the other club was Suburbs. And that little girl is Stephanie Hancock. So I just was right on the edge of some younger girls starting to play, but I didn't really fight it hard because the gender roles back then, girls just didn't. And I think even if someone said, do you want to, as much as I actually did, I would have been afraid that it would have been too different for me.
So you had to wait, or wait may be the wrong word, because when you wait for something, it's because you want it. You never really chased it, so therefore it appeared out of nowhere.
Yes.
It's fair to say, at the age of 23.
Correct. I was back in Warwick doing prac teaching. The local butcher, Greg Carey, who was, I think, a president of one of the clubs at the time, said, we're having a fundraiser. We're going to put on a women's game. It attracted something like 3,000 people. It was phenomenal because it was a spectacle, because women didn't play. And I jumped at the chance. I couldn't say yes quick enough. I'd spent a lifetime around the game, absolutely playing in the backyard, neighbourhood full of boys. We'd go down to the local oval of the school grounds, and I knew how to pass and kick and catch. I knew how to tackle. I'd been tackled. So to then get the opportunity to put on a jersey and run on as a team, I'll never forget it as long as I live. I think I've got a copy of it on a cassette. Steph Hancock played for the opposition team, and I didn't miss it because I didn't think it would happen. But the moment I got an idea that it could happen, I didn't look back, and it was from that game I found out there was a competition in Brisbane. I didn't even know. Like, I'd been to uni in Brisbane and didn't know women were playing league, before social media and things like that. So it was just...
So what was the next step then? What did you have? After that game, you got the taste and you thought, right, that's it. What happened next?
So what happened was Toowoomba Phillies, I didn't realise this because I'd spent most of my time between Brisbane and then out on properties at Cunnamulla and things. Toowoomba Phillies had a team in the Brisbane comp and they had a bye round. So the locals that had organised the Warwick-Killarney game combined us. So Steph and I and our teammates and sisters, we combined, did a bit more training, and we played Toowoomba Phillies at another fundraiser. And they had a lot of rep players and Gillaroos and Queensland players, in a system we didn't know existed. And at halftime, we were actually winning. Now, we went on to lose that game, but from that game, the coach approached a handful of us from this Warwick-Killarney combined team, said, look, do you want to sign up? We're in a Brisbane comp. And Steph and I went on to do that with a couple of other girls. And it was from there that the opportunity to play for Queensland and Australia came. Well,
it's an extraordinary story that someone has gone on to do that and didn't even know that existed, that opportunity existed until the age of 23. How quickly then after you were noticed in that game did it become apparent that I can actually play this pretty well and I now know there is a Queensland and Australian side? When did the ambition or that burning desire to become just more than a player arise?
Well, my entire life I was sort of really, I don't know if I was obsessed, but really inspired by athletes, like, swimmers, even that sports I wasn't necessarily that good at. My entire life as a child, I thought the greatest thing you could ever do in your life is represent Queensland and Australia in sport. I was fortunate enough right at the end of year 12 to make a Queensland school track and field side. So I'd had a taste of that representing the state. So it was absolutely, the moment I even knew there was a Queensland and Australian team, I didn't know if I was good enough, but I was inspired to try and make that side. And a local journalist actually in Warwick, Jared Walsh, who was a big champion of local athletes, he wrote an article, which I still have a copy of, that was local pair could play for Australia because he'd spoken to a coach that day that had said that Joe Barrett and Steph Hancock could play for Australia if they took this sport up. So there was that sort of chat, but I didn't necessarily think I was better than the rep players, but I was certainly inspired from that. Absolutely, the moment I knew, I was like, oh, that would be just the greatest thing ever, is to make those sides. So I kind of just went about finding ways to make that happen.
Well, how would you like to be the owner of one of these? A FOGS authentic game ball signed by Wally Lewis at the 2023 Wally Lewis medalist Reuben Cotter. Now, all you have to do is subscribe, like, and drop a comment below. And each week, gentlemen, we'll be giving away one of these footballs to one of the viewers of the FOGS Queenslander podcast. Well done.
Well, it's good to be able to hand them on to the general public who like it, as long as we don't get blamed for breaking one of Mum's windows when they're kicking it around the backyard or tossing it around.
Framed, but this will be framed in a nice
Reuben Cotter's name. Wow.
Do you know how to subscribe and like and do all that, Gilly? No?
Oh. We can help you, mate. We can help
you. Help me out, fellas.
The two daughters can help you out.
So we have one of these to give away each week until stocks run out, until Wally gets sick and tired of signing them and Reuben Cotter disappears. But just subscribe to our channel, FOGS Queenslander Podcast. Write a comment below and click that like button. Everyone goes into the draw, and we've got one of these to give away each week. And what was it like? How easy was it for you to play? Not playing with your brothers and friends in the backyard and on the periphery is one thing, but actually being out on the field with teammates around and a proper game. How long did it take you to realise that, I know how to play this?
I think I didn't overly analyse it. I really enjoyed it.
Just took to it straight away.
I just was like, I'd had this sort of background of lots of different sports. I was a sprinter and a thrower in track and field. So the contact didn't bother. Like, I loved running at people and I didn't mind being taken out. So the thing that I remember really standing out to me was, it's a lot harder than it looks. For all the people who sit on the sidelines and want to tell people they're soft or get up or take another hit up, that contact of getting knocked down and back up is so different to any other sprint training, netball training. And I'm not saying those other sports are soft, but that physical fatigue and the mental strength you need when you're feeling a bit rattled or a little bit intimidated. There's nowhere to hide in footy. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I just remember that being a standout thing.
It sort of does, because you've gone from mucking around to being serious, and there is a massive difference. Yeah.
And I thought, I learnt very quickly, and I'd come off, I was at an age where I was drinking plenty socially on the weekends, and diet was nothing other than the food you ate. So I learnt pretty quickly with the phys ed teacher's background, the fitter I am, the more I look after myself, the better I'll be, the better chance I'll have of playing rep footy. And the last thing I wanted to do, if I ever was to make a team, was then be underdone as an athlete. So I sort of had that mentality pretty early, and it probably saved me in a lot of ways, because I was probably at an age where I was a bit lost, hadn't gone as far in track and field as I liked. I was probably drowning my sorrows in socially drinking and feeling a bit not sort of happy with who I was or where I was. And footy kind of gave me a real focus, and I just wanted to be the best player I could. And I knew I had speed and strength, and I knew I had a competitive edge, and I knew I had a love of the game, but there was lots of skills I didn't have. So I had to work really hard around that. I wasn't as natural as Steph. Steph could read the game better. I was a real amateur when it came to set plays and field position, and I had to really lean on what I knew I had and work really hard. I had to work harder than most people because I wasn't naturally as good at the game, I don't think.
And you were coming through, is it fair to say, at almost like a transition stage whereby those that had really, launched women's rugby league and so on were still playing, but the game was developing and starting to grow, and you were coming in at a time where it was more widespread, there were more girls playing, more opportunities for girls, and did you feel as though that the game was building?
I did, because I was sort of really seeking more information, and I was looking up who'd played for Australia and how long they'd played, and I'd known that there was these one-off games over the last several decades. My auntie had played in a one-off game in Warwick in 1960. So I sort of had this backstory in my head, but I do think I came into the game at a time where the word was getting out. The Steph Hancocks of the world were coming over. She was on a trajectory to be an Olympic javelin thrower. And because of her pedigree, she was like, oh, geez, if I can play league, I'll play league. So it was sort of probably the first stage of the game growing. And I look at those players, like you got the likes of Tani Norris and Karen Murphy, who played through to the next change. But then you had the Veronica Whites and the Annie Bankses that were playing and administrating the game. The game wasn't tied loosely to the national bodies and state bodies at the time. And you could watch them come and take a hit up and play a game and then go and fill out the form for the ref. And I watched that shift and I observed. And they were the women getting us in and encouraging us. And I was then living out near Cunnamulla, and they were sort of trying to attract the game. So it was a really interesting period. And my memory is the athleticism of the girls shifted like sort of week by week. And we were getting a little bit more of a go, and more people were taking us on, and word was getting out there. Nothing like it is now. But I think that certainly was something I got a front row seat to, because I was trying to get to training and I was trying to learn. And the shift for me from where I sat was like people in my world who'd never really talked or considered or approved of women playing rugby league. And I'm talking my mates, my old teachers, my relatives. Well, they were starting to talk to me about it and wanting to come and watch a game and giving me feedback and telling me where I should stand, to take a hit up. So, yeah, it was a bit of an evolution that took the game sort of out of the shadows and people started paying attention.
Well, tell us what it was like, what the environment was like, what you had to go through when you were selected to play for Queensland for the first time. Now we're about to, as we record this, have a 3-game women's origin series. But the first interstate match you played, what were the conditions like, the facilities that you had to do, and how much did it cost you to play?
Okay, so my first game for Queensland, I'd been playing club footy for Toowoomba, but I had been doing a lot of travelling. So I didn't get to a lot of my career. Like I'd played footy every weekend, but I hadn't gone to trainings. So when I went to Queensland training, I was travelling. I was temporarily staying with my parents in Warwick. I'd finished teaching was on a contract at Warwick High. I'd drive from Warwick over to Davies Park. So just get there just before training started, spend all afternoon in the car. And I can remember going to training at Davies Park and not having a clue about any of the drills. Like I knew how to run on and take a hit up. So I'd always go to the back of the line. So by the time I got to the front, I'd just do what the girl in front of me did. So that's a distinct memory. There's no such thing as you didn't get training gear. You just wore whatever. Skeleton staff. So one of the coach's sons played for Souths. He ran our water. Karen Murphy, Tani Norris was sort of doing a lot of directing, players. And it was probably less professional than your average club training session now. But I thought, this is amazing. I'm going to wear a maroon jersey. And as a rare thing, because it was my first game for Queensland, and then for years I didn't get to do this, we actually played at Suncorp. No camps, like no gear, a fee. I got one polo shirt, one training shirt, which I still have faded. We didn't stay. So on the day of the game, my cousin actually drove me we all met at at a venue near Davies Park on the morning at 10 a.m. I think we played at 1. We got a bus to Suncorp. No one was in there. It was a Broncos game, but no one was in there because the gates weren't open. And I remember asking my cousin, I just had to double check where to stand for kickoff. And I should have known that because I grew up, but I was nervous. I was like, no, I'm second row. I'm on the sideline, aren't I? And now, it's crazy because we went on to win, actually, by the way. That was in the middle of our streak. So it was an amazing experience. I remember being overwhelmed by being in Suncorp, and I didn't care that it was empty because it was such hallowed ground. So I actually did my ACL at the end of that game and handed my jersey back because we were playing 2 games that year and my replacement needed it. And I think they were club jerseys from Burleigh Bears. So that, they're the highlights, lowlights, but it was it still felt amazing. It was still that Queensland jersey. It was still that opportunity to represent my state. And then I did my knee, so I was back to the drawing board.
And in those days, you do your knee, you're pretty much on your own, aren't you?
Oh, thousands, yeah. I had private health insurance because I just always did. But there was no insurance I got a taxi home, I think, or one of the players dropped me home. There was no bus. There's no feed after. And now, I'm heading into being the media manager this year. I've been very involved in the last few Origin campaigns, and it's just incredible the shift in the staff that's around the players, the equipment, the nutrition, the information. They're the athletes that we have now. It's a testament to what the women's game can deliver once they were looked after. But I know when I debuted for Queensland, I was probably given a much better treatment than the women who went 5 and 10 years before me.
It's all part of the journey, isn't it, too? And you are closer, obviously, to the players now. And people like yourself and Tani and Karen and others and Steph would be able to let them know exactly how things are developed, and they would no doubt appreciate where the women's game has come to.
Yeah, I think they do. Look, I certainly get that impression from, so many of the girls I've worked with since I played 11 years ago now. But I know that, and I speak for all the coaches that have sort of been involved, from probably Brad Donald was my last Queensland coach, and then he coached Queensland for a while. So I reckon in the last decade, I'd have to really commend that it's been really obvious to me as a former player that the coaching staff that they've had have wanted to keep old girls coming in and keep those stories alive and share those experiences because they can get lost along the way. You do have a team changeover, and then the girls who've even come in the last 10 years, even since my last year. My last year we stayed at Royal Pines for about nearly a week, and I thought, mate, we're basically professional athletes. I thought Brad Donald had hung the moon when we had that experience. And so I've watched that build. But if you come in now, if you've come in the last decade, you would assume as a player that, well, that's what we do. And what's been really impressive is how important it's been for current coaches and players like Ali Brigginshaw and Steph Hancock, who've stayed in the game so long, to keep the girls humble in, hey, this jersey it's got a story, and we're here because of the people before us. And I just think that's almost reflects in general the state of Queensland, right? The humility and the capacity to respect what's gone before you, I think, is a really big part of our story as a sport.
What does it mean to you walking into this building, this FOGS building, and seeing that honour board in the foyer of the FOGS building, the men on one side and the women's Queensland women representatives on the other, and your name up there, number 44, I think?
Yeah. Am I 43? I think I'm 43.
In the 40s.
It's impressive that you're close. It makes me emotional because when you're doing that at the time, and I've talked about how important it was to me, but you don't do it, you don't really think this will be a moment in history that goes on a board that when I sit and look at it is given the equal recognition of the men. And that makes me emotional because it says so much about where we've come. But as a little girl, like where I'm from and my life experiences, the Origins just lights people up. The story, what the men have done for us as a sport north of the border has just really got into the hearts and minds of Queenslanders. And when you see yourself, you know, on a board that's next to them, it honestly, it makes me emotional because not when I was younger it didn't, but now I think you just don't know what you're doing at the time and the long-term impact of that. And for me now, the bigger picture is I'm a parent and I'm part of this community I grew up in, an extended family, and it's probably only hitting me now as I'm older. I talked to other players about this, what that board and that number means to those people who you played for. So it's quite amazing. It's quite amazing to see.
Who had the biggest influence on your career?
Whoa. Overall, I'd have to say my father, because I think there's so many players and people and coaches. It's hard to single them out because it just depending on the era and the stage and the injury I was dealing with. But I probably, that's the connection point for my dad and I over 43 years of my life was the chat we had about football before I was even playing sort of probably was a big part of our relationship. And so then he always supported my sport and he always supported netball and track and field. Turned up as a parent every day of the week, but when we could talk footy and my footy and he would give me really, really honest feedback, you know, that's really special. That really, I think, connected us.
Looking back on your career, the fact that it could have been over for Queensland after one game with that ACL, is that one of your greatest achievements to be able to overcome such a devastating injury in a time when we don't have, and you're not that old, but I mean, medical procedures have come a long way.
Yeah.
And even back then, it was still a major surgery you had to go through. But not only did you manage that, you've come back to play more games for Queensland, continued your career and represented your country. How do you look back on that?
Oh, yeah, I'm very, I'm so grateful every day that I pushed through it. It was really, really tough because, you know, social acceptance of women's footy from employees to most people in the street, it wasn't. People were like, what are you doing that for? And then it was like, once that injury is, get on with uni, go and get a job. That's a ridiculous pursuit for a lot of people. And I just didn't. And I had to go back to my parents and I had to do, you know, like financially I took a huge hit and then, you know, I then had a break from the game because I took my first job teaching at Roma and then as the first year teacher in a country town is all things hard work and play. And there were so many probably challenges to getting back and being fit. And thank God because it just changed everything and it gave me an opportunity to then, you know, like you said, play in World Cups. And then I actually that set me up for in 2011, I broke my leg very badly. And I drew on that initial experience to get back to play in the 2013 World Cup. But that to me, that whole coming back from that injury in that era where rugby league was and where it was heading, probably formed a lot of my character as an adult that sort of helped me in all areas of my life, I think.
If I could give you a potion that was WADA approved, that enabled you to play one more game in the current climate,
Yes.
would you jump at the chance?
100%. I'd do it this afternoon. Yeah.
Where do you want to see the game in 5, 10, 15 years?
Oh, good question. I'm working in it now. I'd like to see it keeping on with the progression, making sure we're looking after everyone involved in the game, from the players right through to who's working for it. I'd love to see the pathway of women and girls grow to a point that it's contributing successfully at grassroots in those country towns. There's 2 under-8 teams right through, I'd love for that grassroots stuff to just keep building, where little girls are running out and playing or refereeing. It's on its way, but it could be better. Right through to, ultimately women being full-time NRL athletes. That would just be unbelievable.
Well, Joe, thanks for your time. Congratulations on a wonderful career.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching this episode of the FOGS Queenslander podcast. If there's a FOG you want to hear from, leave a comment to let us know. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos.